I wear two different suits, one that kind of literally and figuratively. If you turn around, you can see them. Guess which one? Yeah. Guess which one I might be wearing in the Melvins?
Is it the Jackson Pollock one?
Yeah, exactly. That sort of blood splatter Jackson Pollock for the Melvins, and then I've got this white suit that is
Virgin Bride white.
Yeah, Virgin Bride white. But so that's an extra part about touring with the Melvins is that I've got that sort of thing. I don't know. What's it like touring with the Melvins, Jeff?
I'm having a great time. Actually, it's more like we just swap out lead singers because not only is Steven in both bands, the drummer Dale is in both bands. So it's just the Red Cross goes on stage, Jason and I leave, and Buzz comes on. So it's more like a Broadway show.
Yeah, I guess I mean from the standpoint of like, do you feel like you have to up your game when you're playing with a band like that? They bring it, obviously.
We always bring it. Okay. We always bring it no matter what. And so do the Melvins, so that's not really an issue. I think it's more of a...
I mean, the thing about the Melvins, it's like they've always... Ever since I've been with them, and I think they've got a long tradition before me playing with them, they always put together, I wanted to say curate, but that's such the pretentious word that gets used. Curate a very diverse show. They're not into playing with like stoner rock bands or bands that would maybe be lumped in with them in a iTunes playlist. Yeah. I mean, at least since I've been playing with them, they're always looking for something that's kind of a different vibe.
Variety.
Yeah, variety. And yeah, so, I mean, I've been calling it a cavalcade of stars.
This particular tour is like a variety show. It's exactly what it is.
You mentioned costume changes, which is
I do costume change. And then also, the show starts off with Toshi Kasai doing 20 minutes of...
Moog. He does like a Moog raga, Moog synthesizer, but kind of a meditative with visuals. That's how the show starts, and then we come out, do our full blast
hour-long power pop extravaganza.
Which is our weird psychedelic power pop weirdo punk rock thing. And then, like I said, we all leave the stage, and Jason and I hang out. Steven and Dale change their costumes. They go out with Buzz. And what we've been doing is, and then we do the finale together. Both bands in their entirety.
Because Melvins never do an encore, so
we do a finale.
So Jeff and Jason come back out, and we do a triple guitar attack fantasy.
Kind of puts a big period at the end of the show, so it's fun. It's like it's kind of like Alice Cooper Kiss kind of thing.
Like every night, pretty much. There's always like all the hands in the air at the end of the night, and it just feels very satisfying.
So this is a full bore tour. I know for a while there, you guys were kind of stop and go. I mean, there wasn't.
But this, in terms of the length of the tour.
Yeah,
this is a 10-week tour, and for Red Cross, this is the longest tour we've done in like 20-some odd years.
Since the 90s. We've done 1-month tours. We haven't played 2 months solid.
We were on hiatus from 97 to 2006, and then when we got back together in 2006, we got back together with a lineup that had recorded a record called Neurotica back in 87. And that lineup is great, but it's just lots of practical matters. Everyone's got serious careers and day jobs and stuff that really prevented us from doing anything more than ever a 2-week run. And that went on for quite a long time. And then since Dale's been playing with us for about 2 years now, we've been able to do longer, more extended runs. So we did a month in 2017 of the States, and that was the longest we had done in years. We played the center of the country, which we hadn't done since the 90s. And now this is just sort of that same thing, but taking it further. And it's also right on the heels of a new album. So we haven't done that since 97, like a proper extended tour across the U.S. on the heels of a new album. When we put out Researching the Blues in 2012, we were only able to do two-week runs each on the coasts. So this is really...
Not to mention a couple of Australians.
Yeah, we've always been able to go over to Europe and Australia. I mean, go to Spain for a week, or we go to Australia for a week where a promoter kind of organizes everything for you.
That sounds like a good deal.
It is.
Take a kind of a semi-vacation.
Yeah, but it's kind of
You have to look at it that way, too. It's not really like you're a working musician where you're sustaining yourself from it.
It's good. There's so much prep involved in getting ready to go on the road to do kind of show we do. So we might as well just
keep it going
as long as possible, because once we stop, we atrophy and have to relearn everything over again. It's just, Steven and Dale have been playing pretty much nonstop, but Jason and I, since the tour before this one, what was the one before this one?
Well, we did in 2017, we did a couple of tours. We did a U.S. tour on our own, which was really neat because we hadn't done a headlining tour in years. And then we did, with the Melvins, we did Europe and Australia, which was incredible because we just kept traveling east.
Yeah.
I'd never approached Australia from the east.
Turns out you go all the way around if you keep traveling.
Yeah. The books seem to be true.
Crazy. So I hadn't played live for a long time.
After that European run.
we made our record, but and it was like, I have to learn how to sing over again. You have to learn everything. It's just,
you don't keep your chops up in the downtime. No. You don't play every day at this point in your life.
I love the only instrument I practice is the drums. Or the drums.
Yeah.
Which are useless to me in this band. I'll noodle on my guitar, but it's mostly the voice. I'm not singing for a while. It's just you have to kind of learn I have to learn how to do it all over again and play.
I like to say my throat scabs over.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can start singing again. You'll pick it up. You've been doing it your entire life. When you haven't toured for that long, how's your body holding up?
Oh, good. Pretty good. We all got a little bit sick and, little 2-day colds and sore throats, but yeah, good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing double duty. I think that's neat about the opportunities I have now is just to see that it's I don't know. There was just a lot of, I think I'm kind of sidebarring here, but, in the 90s growing up and doing the music thing, I always kind of really bought into it being a young man's game, rock and roll.
Sure.
And I think that was probably more of just conditioning from the marketing machine that was only interested in selling young men.
But there's a certain aspect when you're really coming up and you're really just, in that van where that might not be something you could.
Sure, there's practical things about, whether or not you've got, a family yet and, whether or not you're afforded the luxury of going on the road and making no money. But for the most part, there's also just this element of the industry not really being interested in promoting middle-aged people doing rock and roll. And that's changed. That's one positive thing about the internet. You don't really need that machine anymore because you can kind of connect with whoever, or at least for people like us that were once in the machine, once had a little break, shot at it, and they fed us through it. Now there's, thousands of people across the country that still are interested in us, and so we have a way of connecting with them and going out and doing it. But that was a sidebar just about.
Sure.
But what I was saying, but personally, physically, more relating to your question, I've found that I'm actually much better at all elements of this, playing and also the physical side of it. I'm much more resilient and emotionally resilient too. I used to take it really hard if there was a pressury big deal show and it didn't meet expectations for myself. And now a lot of it's probably also taking cues from Buzz and Dale, who have been...
Well, it's also years and years and years of experience.
But I still care a lot, and if I have a frustrating night, I might be prone to not being my best self and turning into a baby man for a second. But now I just kind of get it. I know what to not sweat, and so much of it is it's the mental taxing on your brain. If you care, it is.
If you don't care, then you can just be a machine.
What's an example of something that at the time seemed like the end of the world, and now in hindsight, it's ridiculous that you sweated over it?
Oh, just so many things, just taking on other people's expectations of how we should perform.
But you mean Red Cross has always been very strong performers, but it's partially because we do care so much. But something having kind of a sore throat singing out of pitch for a portion of the show would just wear on me, and I don't care anymore. Now I care because I'm actually much better than I was then because I don't freak out about those dumb, stupid things.
Yeah, so much of it's a mental game.
Yeah, it's just these weird little things that hit you when you're playing, that pull you out of the moment. So now it's easier to be in the moment and kind of let little little bits of little surprises just kind of bounce off you.
The wisdom of knowing what to sweat and what not to sweat.
I think the thing you have to keep in mind is that even though you've been doing this for decades now that every show is somebody's first show. Every show is somebody's like first shot at seeing you. You don't want to beat yourself up over something, but you do still want to bring it every night.
Well, yeah, because it's really depressing if you end up on automatic pilot. That's what you do not want to do. And we've had tours many years ago that was the case. But I think right now we're really, really grateful to be performing, and it's really great to see people coming out. And a lot of people are bringing their kids now, you know, and it's like, it's just rad. I love it. And yeah, like I agree with Steven. I bet as a musician, as a singer, as a performer, is like hands down way better now than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just because it's more second nature. I mean, it's just more, I don't know.
Is there a point in your respective careers that you can look at that felt like you were on autopilot, that felt like you just weren't giving it your all?
Surprisingly not. But there were like a couple, like the tail ends of a really long, grueling tour. Like, say, there's been a few shows that were kind of just on automatic pilot. But for the most part, no, because you never really know what you're going to get when you get up there. And, you know, we do sound check every day, but it always sounds completely different than when we get on stage in front of people. So there's still enough to keep us on your toe, to keep you on your toes.
I think around 97 when we went on hiatus back in the day, you know, the weird thing about our experience is we started so young. We were playing in clubs by the time I was 12.
So you were 11 when you started, right?
Yeah, so it's professionally been professional. So by the time 97 rolled around, we had been doing it for almost 20 years. And I just remember around that time, like, you know, approaching 30 and going after goals that I had set in place very firmly at 11 started to feel kind of irresponsible or maybe just, I don't know, irresponsible, just curious about, you know, what else is out there. And I think just anxiety got the best of me around then and zapped me of a lot of the joy of doing it. The anxiety of expectations that I had for myself and the team that worked with us and all that. So I would never say that we were ever phoning it in at that time at all. But I remember battling, I guess, what I would just call depression now, you know, and so that was hard. So it's very different now to approach it with a bunch of different life experience. You know, for me, having Jeff on the road with me is because I've toured so much in the past 10 years without him, between Melvins and then I'm in another band called Off. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's just, I mean, not to be corny, but there's just so much gratitude, you know. I'm very aware of how unique it is to play with a sibling. I'm very aware now of how different it is to have this, you know, having been a side musician or a member of a band, but in, you know, a band that I didn't start and things like that. It's, you know, it's a very special thing. So I just think that that's a big thing that only time can give you. Wisdom in life, you know, cobbling together some wisdom from life experience is, I wish, you know, the old expression about, you know, youth is wasted on the young. I don't think I could have been given myself this when I was 25 anyways, because you don't hear it when you're 25. I've told kids that are like, you know, their bands are feuding and it's like, but they've got a certain amount of success. I'm like, well, you guys can like work it out and figure out how to do this, or you can take 10 years off, but you're going to get back together in your mid to late 30s likely. You've made enough of an impact now where the offers are going to get to the place where you're going to get, assuming everyone's healthy enough. So which path do you want to take?
There is this idea, and I think you've spoken a little bit counter to it, but there is this idea that you do just get that one shot, right? That's sort of the mythology in the music business.
Well, like there's only one view of success, you know, and I personally, I didn't harbor that like whole like triple platinum billion selling records thing, that expectation too close to heart. I don't know, but I can't speak for him or anyone else in the band. I just wanted to just continue doing it.
It must skew your perspective, though, when your friends and the people you're playing with hit that level of success.
Yeah, that's a little bit, you know, that's always a little strange when people that you know all of a sudden, but you also know that it's also chance, you know. Mm-hmm. It's a big part of it. It's not timing. It's not like someone's, you know, taking something from you, and their success is not taking it from you, but at the same time you do see there's just like certain timing, certain luck, just certain things have to happen. And you know, on top of being good and interesting. Good and interesting isn't always enough to have that type of crazy lottery success.
But that one chance thing, I feel like, I mean, maybe that's just my perspective because that's my experience.
Well, that's not really your experience. We've been on several major labels.
Sure,
but several different.
But what I was going to say is, I feel like it's a different environment now. You know, I just think the artists have so much more say over their path. You know, it just, you know, like. I mean, someone else could explain this much more eloquently than but I just think that media has changed so much, and I do think it affects artists that are maybe aiming to become mainstream artists on some level. I think it must affect you differently because we don't really have that kind of a world anymore where there's never going to be a moment where there's however many people that were watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan where everyone's tuned into that same moment. Yeah. I mean, I know as much has been written on this topic. I can't see that ever happening again. And so expectations are different anyways. Everything is very
personalized.
Niche, however that is. And so I think that puts a different expectation on young artists today. But I think for us, you know, we did have that moment where we had built our way up from the, you know, college level, and then suddenly it was time for us to sign to a major label. And then the person that signed us didn't necessarily have a very clear vision about us. It was just his moment to be able to sign a band at his corporate job. And it happened to be kind of our moment to be signable. And sure, we probably had a couple of different labels we could have chosen from at that moment. But it was more like, it was just this kind of moment that we were afforded by. I don't know. I just don't think that is the same way that it goes now.
Sure.
You know, I think it's a bit different. And I'm not saying I ever expected us to sell 3 billion records either. I remember when we got our shot on Atlantic Records in 1990, I couldn't relate to anything that was mainstream successful. We grew up loving mainstream music, but mainstream music of another era. You know, we were Beatles fans and Rolling Stones fans, but in 1990, what was going on was like the Spin Doctors or whatever, which I could not relate to at all.
Bon Jovi,
things like that. And so sure, we had our like Monkees, Beatles fantasies, and we didn't want to be negative and say like, and close ourselves off to the possibilities. But at the same time, we didn't have a pessimistic opinion either, which I think nowadays is probably a wiser way to go, which would have been sort of like, really? You think so? Okay, well, go for it. But if it doesn't happen, it's not on me. That's on you. And I've known some people who have had that opinion, and I think it was easier for them to weather that experience.
Jeff, I think you alluded to this a little bit when you guys were caught up in that when you were on the major label. At the time, were you chasing that kind of success?
Creatively, not at all. No, creatively, we were just doing it. We had come up with this sort of recipe that was like hyper bubblegum music from the 70s.
Yeah. Something that would have been a radio hit 20 years prior.
Probably, yes. You know, something like Bubblegum Factory maybe would have sat well on like, you know, next to Yummy, 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 I Got Love in My Tummy. But in 1990...
an Archie song.
But we weren't trying to make that exact.
No, we were trying to blend it with other influences.
Yeah, we were
trying to blend it with
our stew. We did the same thing we do now, you know, but just at that time it was on Atlantic Records.
But there was no sense of like, oh, that Spin Doctor song is really popular right now.
No, but the only thing I would say that the industry kind of got in our way a little bit and imposed themselves was having to work with producers that we didn't really relate to, and they, you know, and. No one forced us, but they did force us to work with a producer. That's for sure. Looking back, I wish that we had just worked with a really very competent engineer that just like realized what we were looking for sonically and then left us alone. Because what we found ourselves in this position is that we were working with engineers essentially, but who were ambitious producers, and they were concerned about their credit and getting to the next place. And they would impose like maybe a guitar sound on us that we would like fight with them over in the studio.
There's a lot of unnecessary roadblocks, but...
And it was annoying, you know? So now I listen back to some of those records and I'd be like, it didn't sound like the way we wanted it to sound. We wanted to take this bubblegum thing, and then we were always told them, no, listen to Live at Leeds. No, listen to the first Zeppelin album. Those are, I mean, maybe we don't have those skills yet, but that's the energy we're looking for. And then you'd be countered with, no, I'm looking for more of a glassy guitar sound. I mean, like, what do you mean glassy? What the fuck is that? You mean like, you know.
Being in the 80s, that was that was horrifying to us.
Yeah, and that's another example of, you know, where you're intersecting, like timing, you know, talking about timing and all that stuff. And you have to, you know, so you have to accept that there's a chance element too, and it's much to do with the context of the popular culture that you are intersecting with at that given time.
Somebody, I think, really nailed it for me. I was talking to them on the show, and they said, you know, the two things that you can use to pinpoint time frame are haircuts and drum sounds.
The snare. Yeah, the snare. How long the reverb goes on the snare. Yeah, things like that. I don't know. I mean, those kinds of things would used to really annoy me a long time ago. I finally over them. Clearly I still ponder them because I can speak quickly about them. But
is that part of the reason why you got your producing chops, was getting thrown through the ringer?
100%.
For the most part, we were always producing our records. You know,
but we would just either have like more of a pushback from someone or not, and we weren't the most articulate. You know, we didn't really know how to stand our ground, and when you don't have that,
but you shouldn't have to fight to get your ideas across.
You shouldn't have to, but it's hard when you're dealing with a huge machine and you're just a bunch of kids.
Well, there's a technical side to it.
That's the thing, is the technical side came later. That was the freedom.
But you're speaking to technicians who speak a different language, and if you don't have that vocabulary, you're at the mercy of them. And
you also must assume that they know what they're doing to some degree too.
Sure, but they might just there might be a chasm in taste where like you might be referencing something and they just don't get it. But that's been a big difference for me. I'm much more of the technical person now in our group, and that's definitely been inspired by the frustrations I've had making Red Kross records with other people. And that wasn't always the case. Sometimes we had really good experiences, but often, you know, they weren't. And often they were frustrating. But, you know, and then also looking back, I mean, to be totally fair, I mean, I think that, once again, we weren't great at communicating. We didn't have the best, you know, we weren't the most emotionally mature people either. I'm sure those situations could have been navigated differently too, and been less, the ones that were friction-y could have been less friction-y on our part as well.
When grunge becomes a major label phenomenon, how much does that actually change the math for you as a band? Or does it just sort of change the producer's expectations in terms of the sound they're looking for?
Well, for me with grunge, it was just like when Nirvana happened, it was a really rare example of music breaking through to the mainstream in your era that you like.
When it was all, rock and roll returning to its roots. And that sounds like a cliche, but it's true. Everything went from being digital, echoey, Canon-like tinfoil to back to guitars, bass, and drums, recorded very
they might have their own kind of punchy way of attacking. It only
lasted for a couple of years, and then now it's back to robot music. But I'm not putting robot music down because I enjoy it. I mean, I like...
Jeff loves K-pop. He's a big K-pop
fan. That's not true. I like a few groups from a certain era.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. But he's been a big fan of those groups for a good decade.
Okay, real quick, aside, top K-pop bands, go.
Oh, not the most popular
Just
ones.
recommend some K-pop.
Oh, okay. 21's my all-time favorite. Okay. For Big Bang is good. I like all the girl groups like Girls' Generation, Miss A, 4 Minute. The newest groups, Blackpink. We saw them last year. They were like the band that was created after 21 broke up. They had the same kind of like, they were like the outsider pop group.
You go deep.
Oh, I can go much deeper.
He's been talking about
I can go much deeper.
I think you undersold your appreciation of K-pop.
Well, because what I like, it's called second gen. Like the first generation was like, I guess from the early 2000s and the late 90s when it started happening. And then second generation was when, like, creatively it was really peaking, and that started in like 2009 and ended in about 2004 15 when the last of those great groups kind of disappeared. So it's called second generation. The fans call it that too.
Are we gonna start seeing some of these influences seep into Red Kross?
Oh, they have.
They have?
Yeah. We have a song called Fighting, and that's a Korean pop term. It just means it's like a rallying cry. It doesn't mean you're actually fighting with someone. It's a very positive kind of thing. And that's the name of one of our songs. So that kind of creeped in there. And yeah, there's a few riffs that creeped in, but I'll never tell. I'll never tell.
Getting back to the idea of jealousy, it's kind of unavoidable, but you can't, a band like Nirvana, you can't fault if, you really appreciate what they're bringing to the table.
I was only jealous if somebody absolutely horrible was all of a sudden became big.
Yeah.
That were from our, I would be like jealous that Poison was big. We would have never liked them even if they weren't big. It didn't matter. But like people that were kind of doing what you do anyway, that was just encouraging.
You guys were kind of like adjacant to them, right? I mean, you were
we played a show at Poison once, but we're definitely not in the same scene. That was like a weird thing where we ended up like, the thing about Red Kross is that we could kind of, since we were never a part of anyone's genre bandwagon, but we were always just such our own thing that we always found ourselves having to pair up in other environments.
And we would always find like the freaky bands to align with from all the various offshoots of LA.
And also just so we had this weird experience of starting at the beginning of this movement.
Yeah.
We started at the same time as Black Flag, did all our first shows with them. So even like 6 years into it, when we're still teenagers, we had a certain sort of, I don't know. I mean, I didn't think of it this way then, but if I look at it now, we had a certain cachet very early on where people would accept us into their environment, even if we didn't totally conform to the rules and regulations of their limited genre.
Well, we were educators. I mean, we were so young but very precocious. I mean, to discover like Ramones and very early on and to be in the punk movement but still appreciate Jim Dandy and not be like Black Oak, Arkansas and not be ashamed and be able to educate the kids.
Yeah.
We made an educational record called Teen Babes for Monsanto for the peers who are our age that were in punk scene who didn't really know music. They didn't really understand the music that nucleus that kind of made the punk rock that created. Basically was the nucleus.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting angle, like to be educators. But how do you do that and like not be completely pretentious and kind of be an asshole?
Well, we were
about
completely pretentious, and maybe we were assholes too. No, we just played. We just thought it would be fun, and it worked because we actually found a lot of the people that we still know today from like making that record. The Teen Babes
the Buzz always says that's the first record he knew of us, and that's when he felt like he identified with us because he liked a lot of that stuff.
Because when hardcore punk rock came out, you just had a uniform and you had to like this kind of hardcore stuff. But as musicians, you knew where it all came from. I mean, even I brought up Black Oak, Arkansas, but I remember Greg Ginn from Black Flag had Black Oak, Arkansas records, So it's like, oh yeah, these people who are 10 years older experience the music we're listening to now firsthand. So, we knew the secret sauce to like the formula. And I think that that made us a little bit different than kids that were our age at the time.
And I think for me, it was also just a thrill of like, because when we first started, we were anti-cover band. That was what that's what young people did if they started a band. And those kids were playing backyard parties for the jocks
like
and the cheerleaders.
Was one of the top ones in LA.
Right. And they would have been doing like, Foghat covers or something. And
the Doors were probably pretty big, I would guess, in LA.
I don't remember the Doors having a big resurgence in the late 70s. It was mostly Black Sabbath. Led Zeppelin. I don't even remember the Who.
Yeah.
It would just be like that kind of rock, and they were just the people who did the best versions of them, most professional sounding copies. And
they would have like, walls of Marshalls in someone's backyard in front of a cinder block wall. And, and at any rate, so we, when we started our band, we couldn't do that stuff. That was like wizardry. And we had just discovered the Ramones and the Runaways, and we were kind of inspired to just write our own stuff. But 3 or 4 years into it, we found a hankering to sort of learn more about this craft that we grew up loving, this arena rock. And so I think that making that record was also a little bit of an education for ourselves in just like the construction of
we kind of
great music.
We kind of learned a lot about songwriting from making that record, from doing covers and making them your own, and seeing how songs are structured and what's repeated a lot in songs that you like. So I mean,
So you were educating yourselves as much as
anything. That's why I'm surprised that not more of those 70s cover group people didn't go off to have like big songwriting careers, except for like.
But you said Van Halen. That was an example.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these bands were in cover bands, but I think a lot of they don't talk about it because it's like not a proud moment.
Yeah. There is this conception that punk was a reaction to kind of like bloated 70s stadium music at the time, but it sounds like you guys were completely on board with it.
All the people that we knew that were musicians liked that kind of.
Well, I mean, it's like Black Flag would have been like an example of a band that was tearing down all of these constructs from the era before them, but at the same time,
the guys in the
they
band
were big fans of that stuff, Like, it turns out that Black Flag were into the Grateful Dead even, And so, they were into the most sort of overwrought, like 2-hour jam bands.
Because they grew up in real hippie beach communities in the 70s. We were in the 60s and 70s.
And also, Black Flag, Greg Ginn was, UCLA educated. He was smart enough to probably understand that he needed to react to make some kind of voice for his generation or something, He probably understood it on some kind of sociological level that I wouldn't have understood.
Yeah, we were just kids doing it.
We were just little kids,
Was there anything that you feel like, and any chances you didn't take, any thing you didn't do because it wasn't punk enough, or it didn't feel like sort of like true to that ethos?
We definitely didn't. We definitely didn't turn anything down because it wasn't punk enough.
Yeah, I have zero punk regrets. That's I still do not regret.
Was there ever though a sense when you kind of look back and you had some of these opportunities in front of you that something like
that we may have turned down
looks like
it was like,
or that it was self-sabotage that you like?
Only thing I would say, there might have been times where things just seemed too stressful to try to do. Sure. When we were making Third Eye, and I was already talking about the glassy guitar sound. What was that guy's name? G.E. Smith?
From SNL. Yeah,
I know, but he was getting referenced in the studio by our producer, and we would listen to that, Paul Schaefer band guitar sound. I'd be like, I don't want that guitar sound.
He was also the guitar player from Hall & Oates too.
Yeah, exactly. But the glassy guitarist from Paul Schaefer's band wasn't G.E. Smith, though. G.E. Smith,
he was on SNL.
Yeah, he's always kept it very real.
Sorry. I'm sorry,
G.E.
No, not you, G. I meant the other guy from Paul Schaefer band, who I'm sure is an awesome musician.
They were going for glassy tones for a while, but that was we
equated that
Police
influence.
It was like Police and like Phil Collins records.
Yeah. That really staccato-y sort of.
Yeah, and it just has a watery tone.
Yeah. But like we were never like, that doesn't jive with our punk ethic or ethos or whatever. And we were always kind of game to throw ourselves into weird situations. If anything, it would be more like us progressing as musicians and performers and then still playing with punk bands was actually the ballsy thing for us. I remember we played a show at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles supporting Social Distortion at the height of their initial powers when they put out their first album and suddenly became really big in this burgeoning punk scene. And, we just had like 2,000 angry skinheads wanting to kill us because we looked like the New York Dolls in 1973, or something, and it was very confusing.
You've formed some lasting relationships. You're playing with Keith and Auth, for example. But I mean, do you think that in hindsight that it was a net positive or negative that you were never really a part of a specific scene in that same way?
Oh, we would never wanted to be part of a scene entirely. We're on the outskirts of all of those, like the SST thing. We never wanted to be on SST records.
Do you think though that it might have been detrimental to the career that you weren't easily identifiable?
Maybe yes. It's a very referenced thing nowadays.
Yeah, yes, but maybe no. At the same time, I don't see the joy. I would have got joy from being involved with that movement at the time. And then I had a girlfriend who was in the Paisley Underground movement.
Okay.
We were friends with all those bands. We weren't Paisley Underground. We were a punk band. We were friends with, hardcore people, but we weren't a hardcore band.
I found a flyer recently that was, we were playing with Black Flag and the Bangles.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 1984.
But I set that show up. But the thing about it is like, we just were, I think,
the core was we were huge, just rock and roll fans. And we came up in the punk scene, and that was just basically the underground movement. And you knew you didn't really want to be part of anyone's club, but we did have friends.
But the question is sort of like, do you think that you could have gotten further or gotten a free ride or something from a scene that we never really aligned ourselves with? I mean, maybe there would be one record on SST from 1985 that go for a lot of money on Discogs right now. I don't know.
I mean, we were friends might make with it all easier the grunge bands, and we were same exact influence as all those bands, but we didn't go full grunge.
But I mean, I guess part of it too, though, is I get the idea. This is probably less of the case now, just because of the industry and technology and the way people consume music. But record labels wanted a label that they wanted a basket they could put
to market.
Yeah,
they needed market, and I understand that dilemma for them. But that's not really...
That's a marketing issue.
Yeah, that's not the band's...
Ultimately, like down the line, if that could have harmed...
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I mean, we could have participated in the marketing of our group. I mean, honestly, came up with something that they could sell. I mean, we were just ourselves, and it was just kind of a little bit in between a lot of things.
I mean, you could say on one level, like, maybe it would have been easier to tour in Europe if we had been associated with some act or not. But this act or another label or something. But at the same time, it's like, well, look, it's 40 years later, and Jeff and I are doing this podcast with you, and we don't really have a lot of people from our graduating class that are still doing this, So I think that it's...
And a lot of the people that made it really big died.
Yeah, so I would think that our outsiderness is probably, at least how I see it, is probably is more of a tribute to our longevity than anything.
Well, we've just... I mean, I say we as a band, when we're together as the Red Cross, the band, we've had this just intensely protected identity. We just know what it is, who we are, and it's like sometimes it doesn't make sense to people, and sometimes people really dig it. I imagine people dig it because we, like you said, we're still doing it many years later.
It's a weird thing because
it's really weird.
It's really hard to articulate something like identity, and for someone like me that I have continued to hold on to the Red Cross identity, but then I interact with other environments, and bands are such their own culture. I'm very aware of internal band dynamics and things, a lot of unspoken stuff. I'm very aware of it, and not in a way where like I'm affected. I'm just sensitive to it. So, and I always want, whatever environment I'm in, I always want to do the best possible job, I can do. So I want to figure out how to find my way and to be a part of that. And so it's really unique for me to be a part of it, to do a tour like this, where it is such a strong, with Red Cross, there's all this history, and it has a strong point of view, I think. And then to put on this other suit and then take on
literally
Melvins, which also have a lot of history and a very strong identity. And it's kind of asking a lot of the audience to accept it,
Well, but like I said earlier, it's more like a theatrical show. You're putting on a suit. You're still honest, but you're putting on, this is Act 2.
But at the same time, I'm not a Juilliard trained actor who's just taking on these different characters.
Well, how many years does it take to master your trade? I mean, you've been doing it since you were 11 years old. So, it's...
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that it's not a character, there's an authenticity.
It's literally
there.
you with the jacket on.
And you're going to figure out how to let you now be part of that. And what part of you also identifies with, the mad, crazy Buzz Osborne, or and how can you accentuate that in a way that still feels authentic to you? I mean, I try not to overthink it, but it's a brain teaser at times.
You alluded to this earlier when you sort of step out for a second and look at the fact that you guys are doing the thing that you started doing when you were 11 and 14 respectively. It's really strange. Like what other instances are there in professional life where people are doing that?
Well, I know for a fact my conclusion is being an artist, being a musician artist is, for me, is not an occupation, it's an orientation.
Because
as in you identify as artists.
Yes, because when I wasn't doing it
Yeah.
for 10 years, I was still thinking about it. I was still listening to other people, still, creating at home.
It was clear that you would come back to it someday?
Yeah, but I wasn't, I didn't do the performing aspect. I never said, I will not perform for 10 years, but I didn't. And, but I was always creative and always doing musical things and everything, and I just realized, this is just a part of me.
You could, not have sex for 10 years, but you would still be gay or straight, right?
Right, that's exactly it. And it's like, oh yeah, I am. This is what I am. And we always talk about identity. And when we said the Red Cross identity is us two together. But even when, we're not working together, I'm still this because I've been doing it for so long.
But it's just your last
It's just
name.
a part of my being.
I like that. It's not an occupation. It's less an occupation, more of an orientation. That's very good. Yeah.
I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's how
I
feel.
think that Jeff is way more. I tend to think that he's more. I don't know, just real deal than I am. The fact that the fact that I can I can find my place in other environments. I don't think it makes me less authentic. Also makes me just willing. I know people that won't do that. That blows their mind too much. But
Do what?
Be in someone else's band.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think I would.
I've had other bandmates that say they would never do that, but they're all one.
But maybe they're not
one
capable.
bandmate.
The thing I will say about Steven, he's much more the musician than I am. He understands. He knows what he's playing and he knows what he's doing. I'm just strictly instinctual. But playing.
That's also the difference between me. I went to school when we went on hiatus. I went to music school and studied theory. I did things he would never do that. I wanted to know the rules, not so I could abide by the ruls. I just wanted to know the language.
You alluded to this earlier that there was a point when you were looking at it and it was there was some depression, as you said earlier, kind of around it. Were you actively considering doing something else, something not music related? No,
I just started thinking maybe I should be producing, or maybe I should. I'm friends with Pat Smear, and I watched him go from working at the SST Superstore to joining Nirvana.
Yeah.
And I started thinking maybe there's the next generation Nirvana I need to step into. I don't know. I just was open. I just wanted to be open because once we talk about the identity once again, and it was it's somewhat suffocating to grow up. Entirely in my entire adolescence, my puberty years, everything into young adult, into adult years had all been under the banner Steve from Red Cross. And so I just, and younger brother, Jeff has a really big personality, and growing up, it was even at times it was hard for me at times. There was lots of pros to it, many pros, but just trying to find my own way and figure out, what there was out there in the world for me. But it never wasn't related to music. I always was interested in trying to find a way to make music work. But I even did things I stepped onto the other side and I worked for record labels at times too. But that's where the orientation comes into play.
But see, I would have never had the nerve to I admire the person that has the nerve to audition for Smashing Pumpkins. I admire that. I think it's
Well, I didn't audition for Smashing Pumpkins. I auditioned for Zwan.
Okay. The Frogs guys were in the Smashing Pumpkins for a hot minute.
Oh, were they?
That was really interesting.
Really mean like Dykes Are We, the Frogs? That
band? Yeah.
Wow.
We're playing touring keyboard for the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Which goes to show, some people.
Well, it's very funny. Billy Corgan's into weird stuff. Yeah. I remember the brief period I was with. They kept calling me back, and then one time I was like, "Okay, come in. This time, bring in some riffs." It's okay. So I brought in. He didn't say it had to be my own.
Yeah.
So I brought in a riff from the fourth Seeds album, Future. It was down.
That's when they started getting really heavy, right?
Yeah, it was this cool riff, but then Jimmy Chamberlain came in and was really weird, and he didn't land on one, and he turned it into a salsa thing. It was so weird. But hang on. So the weird thing about that, and it just reminded me, Billy Corgan had no idea what it was, and then And then I told him later, well, that was a Seeds riff. Oh, really? He was kind of taken aback. And then about 10 years later,
not even 10 years later, a few years later, he got really into the book about the Source family.
Yeah.
And then learned that Sky Saxon was involved with that. Got really into it and got involved with those people, recording some of those people, and Sky Saxon.
Yeah. So he was
at Sky Saxon's memorial.
Yeah.
To be fair, you guys recorded a Charles Manson song.
Yes, we did.
Well, we used to do Seeds covers in the early 80s. But the thing is, I just thought it was funny that you talked about
that just kind of
frogs.
Yeah.
And then Billy Corgan, and it reminded me of the fact that there's a weird little tidbit that I brought a Seeds riff into a Zwan audition. Billy Corgan was taken aback, and then less than a decade later, he's jamming. He was jamming with Sky Saxon and totally obsessed.
But you planted the seeds,
so to speak.
Maybe I did.
What happened in your life? Like, how did you claw your way out of that depression?
Which, you mean the depression about the band going to hiatus?
Yeah, not the
well,
Zwan.
I don't know. It was weird. I remember at that time, one thing, I was really depressed. It's true. And one of the ways I knew was because I couldn't get the cassette out of the pickup truck, my car, and it was ABBA Gold.
No one could be depressed listening to ABBA.
Well, so I leaned on it really heavily. I listened to it for 2 years solid. Yeah. 2 years solid was the only music I mostly listened to talk radio and got into some weird. I went through a weird like Dr. Laura phase. Yeah. Don't tell anyone.
That's called anhedonia. You know the term. That's when you're so depressed that you can't enjoy like art and things you usually enjoy.
So I was definitely going through that, and then but I did still. I cling to, Benny and Bjorn and, and Agneta and Anna-Fried. And, so that was an example of that. But, then slowly I just, I got back into music and I was studying, and then I ended up, touring with Beck. So I did audition. I did continue to do auditions and stuff. And then
you did scouting in A&R.
I did all that kind of stuff, and I produced. But I remember I was producing a record once in Norway. I was producing a Turbo Negro record.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, I produced the third album. I don't know. The guitarist has since told me it's a C+ record. I don't know. But a record called Party Animals.
Yeah.
But
was that the one with the Pet Sounds cover?
No, that's Ask Cobra. That's early days.
Yeah.
This is the record. This would be considered maybe their third finest album.
Okay, well that's pretty good.
Yeah, if you go Apocalypse Dudes,
sure.
And then some people might say Ask Cobra, or they might say the record after Apocalypse Dudes. So it's skipping my. I'm missing it right now, but this one has All My Friends Are Dead on it. At any rate, I just remember I was getting sick of being in a supportive role to other musicians, and that's when the orientation thing comes into play, I think, because I just remember becoming a little bit jealous that they were going to go out on tour after all this was done, and they got to go out there and get that positive feedback from a crowd. I think that records are difficult because there's no gratification. There's no immediate gratification.
I mean, you talk about live bands too.
When performing, like us with our band, we've always approached it. That's an art form in itself too.
Yeah.
So.
As it is with Turbo Negro.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, very much so. And I really, I love those guys and I identify with their trip. But I mean, I think that was one of them when I really realized, I'm getting weird. I need to be back in playing live. I need to go out there and perform more.
I mean, obviously, some hiatuses between records are longer than others, but is there always just a tacit understanding after you're done with each album that there's going to be another one?
I always kind of feel like that. I always think because when we were working on this one, I was thinking, I want to do that the next time, blah, blah, blah. You just have these little mental notes and, you can't predict the future, but I have not had that feeling like this is the last.
No.
Record. I haven't had that feeling. Maybe I will one day, but I definitely do.
Also, this is now, so we've been on Merge since, Researching the Blues. When we made Researching the Blues, we didn't have any label. We just made it on our own, which that was really hard, kind of doing it in your own little think tank, wondering, does anyone give two shits? What am I doing?
That was, 2012 that came out?
Yeah, but we had started it earlier, and it took a long time to finish it, and it was really, and it's a very simple record actually. It's just,
but yeah, we had no deadline, so we would just we'd be like painting a little bit here an afternoon,
but so
putting it
because
down
there were
for a couple weeks.
15 years or something prior to that one.
yeah, well, because but if 97 was Show World, and then 2012.
Yeah. So that 2012 we reactivated in 2000.
We got back together in 2006
As
for
a
our
live
first show,
band.
but then we started researching the blues around 2008. Went to the studio for a couple of weeks and basically did about the majority of the record, but we didn't finish the vocals and we didn't mix it, and it basically was just this long time of learning how to do those things ourselves.
Yeah,
and then and I did a record with Off. In that meantime, and I saw those guys just encourage themselves into finishing it, and I thought, well, fuck it, why am I not finishing that record? That's so stupid. I need to just finish it, and so that's when we did it, but then anyways, having this team, knowing that there's a group of people that are embracing you and want to support you, want to put something out, want to make sure that as many people as possible.
We'll give you a release date.
Yeah, and all that stuff. That makes a big difference.
A deadline.
Yeah. It makes a big difference for the DIYers.
There you go. That was Jeff and Steve McDonald from the legendary Red Kross. Their latest Beyond the Door is out now on Merge Records. Thanks to them for taking the time. Thanks to Caroline for helping us set up that conversation. It was a lot of fun. Buzz Osborne was walking around in the background. What a great time. It was had by all. Thanks to you, as always, for listening to the program. If you like the show, there are a number of ways to support us. You can rate and review us on iTunes, Google Podcasts. We're on Spotify and YouTube. Like us on Facebook. If you have any feedback, it's rylcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Tumblr. That's rylcast.tumblr.com. It's the first and best place to get all of your RIYL related information. And that's about all we got for this week, so stick around because we're going to be back just about this time next week with another episode of RIYL.